Today, how to triple your impact as a product manager. Because product management is now the new bottleneck in product development. Right now, every product manager wants to increase their impact so they're not slowing the team down. But they don't know how to turn AI into real productivity gains because it hasn't been built into the system in which they work. So today I'm going to show you how to triple your impact using AI. And we'll cover these three practical workflows. One, how to use a jobs to be done framework with AI to create sharper requirements in a fraction of the time. Two, how PMs can speed up testing because, like it or not, PM is becoming the new QA. And three, how to build a feedback loop for your product so AI actually improves your judgment over time. And increasingly, this is becoming one of the most important skills to have. Now, each section will have 3 levels that will get you to increasing levels of productivity. And then at the final level, it's what I'm calling the startup mode, which is where you'll get the ultimate level of productivity. So let's get into it. Okay, you're at your front desk looking down at a list of priorities. You need to create a set of new requirements to pass on to engineering for the next sprint. You're furiously typing away because you're not sure you have enough time. You have a lot of requirements to get defined and sent over to engineering, and you need to be able to keep them busy for the next sprint. And you're thinking back to the good old days when engineering was actually the bottleneck and you didn't have to worry about these things. But now product management is the bottleneck. The good news is that there is another version of this that can be true. And the foundation of this workflow is a simple jobs to be done document. Jobs to be done is a way of understanding what your customer is really trying to accomplish when they use the product. Instead of starting with features, you start with the progress of the job the customer is trying to do with your product. And it's not always obvious that the job that they're doing is to create a Word document or to create a new product or to write some code, right? The job behind what the customer is doing is deeper than that. It's fundamentally, what are they trying to accomplish in their life? There's a famous example for this where Clayton Christensen studied this with McDonald's, and he found out that the shake that people would buy in the morning, you would think that the job to be done for that was to satiate their appetite. But really what they were looking for was just sort of a companion on the way to get to their job in their commute. So if the shake was too thin and it didn't last as long, that wasn't good. It needed to be thick, where it was thick enough where it lasted the whole the whole drive. And then that is an example of sort of a non-obvious job to be done. You have to look deeper than just what is the customer trying to do. And I'll link to some good videos you can use to check this out if you want to learn more. This matters because AI is only as good as the context you can give it, and providing it a good jobs to be done document is going to allow you to frame everything the right way, and it's going to allow the LLM to look at the document in a way, to create requirements in a way in which it will really truly have the highest customer impact. So if you ask the LLM to do it without any context at all, you're going to get a generic set of tickets back. But if you give it a strong jobs to be done framework, it can help create requirements that are sharper and more grounded and more useful for the engineering team, and ultimately better for the customer. One important note before we get into the workflow: I use my voice for almost everything that I do when I am writing requirements or when I'm coding. And so I strongly recommend you invest in some tools. I know if you use a Mac, Siri isn't all that great. The product that I use is called Whisper Flow. It is excellent. And I use it for just about everything that I do. And this episode really is about reducing all of the friction that's involved in the product management process. And this matters in AI because reducing this friction is going to triple your impact. You have to do a lot of these things to make sure that you're getting the impact that you need. And a lot of times it's easier just to talk into something than it is to formally write something. So I suggest these tools very strongly. All right. So your jobs to be done document It doesn't need to be super long, right? You don't want it to be 5 pages. You probably want it to be a few pages. Or if you're focusing on a specific new product, then it can be even smaller than that. But when you're creating a new requirement, you should have an understanding of what the jobs to be done is. You want something focused enough that the LLM can actually use it and not too big that it can get lost in sort of a tsunami of context. If you don't have this document, start by giving the LLM whatever context you have. If you have customer interviews, support tickets, sales notes, product briefs, strategy docs, anything that you have. This is the one part of the setup that can actually be slow, right? Because this is going to set up everything that you're going to do later. So you want to take some time with this jobs to be done document. If you already have one, that's great, but just make sure that it's not 5 or 6 pages long. It should be 2 pages. Or again, if you're creating a new feature for which there's no job to be done, write up a 1 paragraph or 2 paragraph jobs to be done document so that the LLM can use this while you're going through and creating your requirements. And when you're working on this jobs to be done document, make sure that you're telling the LLM that what you're doing. You're creating a jobs to be done document that is going to be used in the writing of requirements. And so you want to make that very specific, because it will allow the LLM to figure out how to frame it in a way that's best for itself to understand. And then you're going to go through an iterative process when you're creating this document. You're going to have to tighten up the job statements. You're going to remove anything that's generic and make sure it really reflects the job that the customer is going to do or needs to do. And remember, it's not always the obvious thing that they're trying to do. There's something 1 or 2 levels deeper that they're really trying to accomplish. And if you understand what that is, you'll build better products. Once you have that, everything else is going to speed up. So on this one, take your time. Now on to level 1. So once you've created your jobs to be done document, you need to create a skill. And you can do this in Claude Code or you can do this in Codex. But what I strongly recommend is you use the tools that the engineering team is using. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend using the Claude app or ChatGPT or Cowork even. Ideally, you're using the tools the engineers are using. So Claude Code or Codex, maybe Cursor if they're using that. But I use Claude Code personally, so I would highly recommend that. I also do use Codex occasionally as well. And so a skill is really just a reusable workflow. It's a set of instructions and examples in context. So don't overthink it. And you can actually ask Claude to create the skill for you. You can literally just tell Claude or Codex that I want to create a skill with this name. And then you can give it your requirement format, because you're going to want these tickets created in a specific format. Give it a few good examples of what that requirement format is. I like to have acceptance criteria be the main part of the document. So a summary, an overview of what's trying to be done, and then really just focusing on acceptance criteria. That comes into play when we talk about things like testing and other stuff later on down the line. So you give them examples of your requirements, you give it your jobs to be done document, and then it can generate a set of requirements that are grounded in that framework. The goal isn't necessarily to create faster tickets, it's to create better tickets faster. All right, level 2. So how do you level this up even more? Now you can make this workflow interactive. Instead of generating a requirements document immediately using the jobs to be done framework and the requirement spec that you have, instruct or add to the skill that the skill will ask you clarifying questions. It will ask you questions that an engineer might ask. And that's going to save you another trip between product and engineering. And so you might have questions that you know that engineers always ask you. So make sure that those are covered inside of the skill. So when you use the skill to create a product requirement, it will use the job to be done's framework, it will use your spec, and it will use the questions that you know need to be answered for engineering to be able to use this. It's also possible that engineering is just using an LLM to code on this as well, and you want to know what those answers need to be. So this is pretty critical. This is going to save you iterative steps when you've created a requirement to when you hand it off. Now, of course, you're going to have to review it, and there's always going to be some questions, but you really want to reduce the ambiguity before it reaches engineering. So instead of writing it, sending it, getting questions, and then rewriting it again, you really want to discuss it with the LLM, get it to clarify anything that may be ambiguous, and then generate that requirement once, or maybe twice if you go through engineering and talk with it, but it shouldn't be 3 or 4 times. This is going to remove a huge amount of back and forth between you and engineering. And now if you level this up to level 3, you can connect this to the actual requirement tools that you use. So in the startup that I co-founded, we use Linear. And so Linear has an MCP server. If you don't know what an MCP server is, you can go look that up, but it's a way for the AI systems to be able to communicate with each other. And so I connect Claude Code to the Linear MCP server. And then whenever I create a ticket, it just doesn't come back and send me a bunch of text that I can copy and paste and put into a ticket. It actually writes the ticket into Linear. It puts it into the status that I want to. It puts it into the project that I wanted to put in. And then it assigns it to the person that I ask it to assign it to. And so again, this is really going to level up your ability to create requirements because they're going directly into the system. And of course, it will ask you the clarifying questions before it actually puts it into Linear. So don't be afraid of that. Once you've put that into the skill, it will ask you those things. So the AI will create tickets directly in your system, in the right project, in the right structure. And now the workflow goes from, idea to writing to copy and pasting it and putting it into a ticket to you have an idea, you vocalize it out, you gets put into a structured ticket automatically into Linear. So you've removed almost all of the friction related to the execution. This is all really about your ideas and your thinking. Now, if you want to think about the next ultimate level, and this is if you're operating in a startup probably, although some companies might allow this, but you don't just have to create the ticket. You can actually write the code using Claude Code to implement the ticket. If you've implemented the ticket in a good way and it's highly structured, the LLM, either the engineer will have the LLM do this, or you can do this theoretically. And so you can actually work in Claude Code to implement the ticket. Now, it requires a lot more than that because you have to be connected into GitHub. You have to know how to do PRs, pull requests, pull requests. So it's much more complicated than that. So this is really an advanced level to be able to go and do this. It requires a lot more access, a lot more responsibility. But in my mind, this is where you need to be if you're going to be working in a startup. You have to be able to do these things. So now that same workflow creates a requirement, or the same workflow that can create a requirement can also ship them. And that's how you triple your impact relative to creating requirements. This isn't about writing faster. It's about removing entire categories of work that you can completely automate. It's about using jobs to be done to give the LLM context and judgment that you would normally provide and think about in a less structured way. And the jobs to be done will give you a better way to do that. And again, it will ask you those clarifying questions. So you want the skill to be consistent, to generate consistent, reusable execution instead of starting from scratch each time. You'll add the clarifying questions. You'll have back and forth with the LLM, not the engineering team, although it probably won't completely eliminate that. And you'll integrate your skill directly into the ticketing system like Linear. So there's no manual overhead of copying and pasting your ticket into a system. And then finally in startup mode, you're going to actually build a ticket. So you've compressed the entire flow. And in this sort of startup mode, I've seen a ticket go from idea to implementation to be pushed into the dev server in 10 minutes. It's literally can be that fast for a smaller feature set. So that is something that would have taken probably 3 days if you went through the formal process of doing it. So that's how you can really move faster at a startup. It's just It's just really exciting right now. Each of these steps are valuable if you do them on your own. So you don't have to do every single one. Some of them are very advanced, and each of them are incrementally going to add to um, how quickly you can increase your impact. But together, they really compound. You go from thinking, refining, and shipping, and it goes much, much faster if you do it this way. And that's where the tripling of your impact comes related to writing tickets. Because if you're not removing the friction at every step of the product development process, you're slowing the team down. Now, whether you like it or not, product management is becoming the new QA, right? And so you have to use AI to test faster and catch more issues. Because again, if you're not doing this, you're slowing the team down. So you're at your desk, it's late in the afternoon, you're clicking through a product feature quickly so you can try to find everything that's going on. QA is now your responsibility, and there's barely enough time to finish this before the next sprint is about to begin. And you're thinking, what am I going to miss? Like, the pressure is building. You're getting Slack messages coming in, and updates keep on flying around you. Like, everyone is super busy trying to get everything complete to go to the next sprint in your test. And you're doing this mostly manually if you're not automating some of this with AI. But it doesn't have to be that way. With AI, a lot of those repetitive QA things can be automated, and it will help you catch issues faster. It'll reduce the manual testing that you're done. It's not quite there where it will completely eliminate it for UI-based applications. It's easier with API-based applications. And it's going to get you more time back to be able to set up the next sprint, which is critically important. And increasingly, in companies, the formal QA role is disappearing, and it's being placed onto product management. Engineers are also asked to do a little bit more now, but certainly product managers are expected to be the last line of defense before the product gets released. It's kind of a shame because there is a real discipline behind testing software well. It's not like, a product manager can just become an engineer. They can't necessarily become like a trained QA professional. That was something that had a certain discipline to it. But it's the reality of where we are right now. These QA resources are no longer available. And, let's be honest, as a product manager, this is not the glamorous part of the role. It's not something you want to be doing. Most product managers don't become product managers because they are excited about testing and clicking through a bunch of edge cases in an app or writing bug reports. Like, that's not the fun part of the job, but it's a necessary part of the job, even more so now. So if you want to triple your impact, you cannot ignore quality. At the same time, if you're spending an inordinate amount of time testing, you're also reducing your impact. You're spending less time on strategy, customer understanding, roadmap decisions, product discovery, and the work that probably made you want to be a PM in the first place. So, you're slowing down the team as well. So the goal is not to avoid the testing. The goal is to make testing faster, more structured, less manual, so you can protect quality without being the bottleneck. So let's talk about how AI can help you test at increasingly more powerful levels. Level 1, AI can help you manually review the product by creating a test plan for you that you can execute against. In many cases, a product manager will just see a list of features and then kind of just walk through and do a gut check to see whether it works. But we talked a little bit about the discipline of a real QA person, and they would create a test plan that was based off of the acceptance requirements that was used to test the flow and used to find edge cases. And this is where having a strong acceptance criteria becomes critical in the requirements, because then you can use them for a test plan. Not only that, but the LLM can use that when it's implementing the code as well. So if you have vague requirements, the testing will be vague as well. If you have vague acceptance criteria, it's not going to be a successful, quick iteration through. So these need to be specific. So you can ask the LLM to look at the requirement and acceptance criteria and generate a test plan for you. So this will create a more disciplined way of going through the testing process. It will identify what needs to be tested, what edge cases might be missing, what steps you should follow to reproduce each of these scenarios. And ideally, every test case should map back to a specific acceptance criterion. And that matters because when something fails, you're not just saying this feels broken. You're saying this specific acceptance criteria has not been met. And then that's something the engineers can work with. You can right now write a bug and have a clear way to reproduce that bug. And then the engineer or the LLM will be able to reproduce it and then fix it. So that's super important. So that's that's level one, using the LLM to help you create a test plan. At level two, you start using AI to automate the parts of the testing process. And this means using tools like Playwright or in browser automation or other AI assisted testing tools that can walk through the acceptance criteria and test to see if those have been met. And if the feature involves sort of API calls, that's even a little bit easier. Claude Code can actually help test those things, or Codex can help test those things. But if it's a UI, you'd need some kind of browser automation. If it's an iOS app, there are tools that you can use within the iOS framework that can create automated tests as well. The important thing is not just talking to AI to test or just telling AI to test the product. You're giving it the requirement, the acceptance criteria, and the expected flows, and you're asking it to test against those expectations. These tests can help catch obvious failures. You can have these things take screenshots and then identify broken states, and you can actually have it draft bugs when something doesn't work. But you do have to be careful because these automated tools are not there yet. We use them within my company, and I'd say they're probably 75% accurate. They're still not catching 25% of the things that we would want it to catch. They miss things, they misunderstand things. They may flag things that are not actually bugs, and they may think something that is a bug is actually working correctly. So use this as a crutch in some level, but you're still going to have to do a quick pass and a manual run through yourself, but it can help accelerate that. And so AI can accelerate your testing, but right now it doesn't replace the product manager's judgment in terms of whether this is actually working the way that it should. And it definitely doesn't fully replace a professional QA engineer who would write a really formal test plan and get this going. But that's the reality of where we are today. So now level three related to testing. At level three, you can connect testing to your product systems. So AI, you can use AI to test a requirement, run it through the acceptance criteria and so forth. And then what you want to happen now is, and I mentioned this briefly in level one, but in level two, you want that failed behavior to create a bug in your ticketing system. So again, we use linear. If it goes through the criteria and it understands that it found something wrong, it would rewrite the way to reproduce that. And then it would enter that into the bug system. So this makes testing faster and more traceable. So in level one, you're finding it manually. In level two, you're finding it automatically. And in level three, you're having the bug get entered automatically into the system instead of manually moving all those things across. So now the workflow goes from requirement to manual test notes to bug write-up to ticket. And instead, you're creating an automated way to write the ticket. So the key thing to look out for here is most times it'll find bugs. So the bugs that it reports are going to be accurate. But the tricky part is the bugs that it didn't find, or it said that it worked correctly. Many times, well, not many times, but like say 20, 25% of the times from what I've seen, that it doesn't catch those bugs. And those are the ones that can be dangerous. So let's now jump to startup mode. And I think you know, based on what we've talked about, you can guess this. In startup mode, you ask the AI to actually fix the bug. I talked about this a little bit earlier. So it's not just automating the bug. You're having the bug get fixed automatically, retested, and then if it's still a bug, it would write another report, and it can go through this loop. And so in order to do this, you need access to the repo, right? So again, you need the permissionings that you needed for the startup level when you're writing requirements, if you wanted to implement them. You also need these if you're going to automatically create the bug and have the LLM go ahead and execute against the ticket. So this is where, again, you're really leveling up to the beyond 3x level here. automatically testing the bug. You're getting it into a testing system automatic. This is where you're helping identify the issue, connecting it back to the requirement, and then some cases actually moving it forward and fixing it. And that's the level of operation in which you need to operate at a startup if you really want to go as fast as you possibly can. So this isn't about turning product managers into QA and engineers. It's about giving product managers enough leverage to protect quality when the old process doesn't exist anymore. AI can help you test faster by carrying context forward from the original requirement. Acceptance criteria becomes the foundation for those test plans, and test plans become structured validation steps. Failed tests become clear bug reports, and integrated systems move those bugs into the right workflow. And then in startup mode, it compresses the entire thing and goes into a loop where it gets fixed. So the old workflow looked like this. You read the requirement, you manually test, you write notes, you recreate the context, you file the bug report, you explain the issue, and then you wait for engineering to fix it. In the new AI-assisted workflow, you're writing the requirement using AI. It's generating a test plan automatically. It's using Playwright and other tools to validate the bug. If it finds a bug, it's creating a ticket. And then if it's creating that bug ticket, AI is fixing it through coding and then going through that loop again. This is where the real leverage comes from. This is how you're not just saving time on testing, you're reducing the ambiguity, improving traceability, and helping engineering get clearer bugs faster, and in some cases, even clearing the bugs yourself. And most importantly, you're protecting your own time. Because if testing expands to fill in your calendar, your impact is going to shrink. It's probably already shrinking right now. You spend less time on customers and strategy and prioritization, discovery, and the higher level work that actually moves the product forward. So the goal is not to become a QA department. The goal is to protect quality without letting testing consume your entire role. This is how AI helps you triple your impact. It lets you catch more issues, move faster without engineering, and get back to the work that a strong PM can do. All right, number 3, using AI to build a stronger feedback loop. So picture yourself in a meeting with your boss. You're about to review the performance numbers for your latest feature release. You hope the meeting goes well, but you're fidgeting because as you start the presentation, you know you haven't had enough time to collect all the data that you need. And you're worried that you're going to look like you don't know what you're talking about, or you don't have a complete set of information, which in some cases you don't. And without enough of this data, you're unable to gain and you're unable to provide any real insights from this release. And you're not learning from the release. And if you're not learning, you're not growing. So how can you prevent this from happening? Well, once a feature is pushed into production, obviously the work isn't done. You need to understand whether it actually worked. This means tracking the right metrics through KPIs and analytics and customer feedbacks and support tickets and so forth. I think you understand that. This is where you learn how well the product is actually working. And for the younger and newer product managers, this may be the most difficult part of the process because this is where the judgment gets built. You have to define features, you have to get them implemented, you have to get them pushed into production, you have to see how the customers are going to respond, you have to get all the data that's required for that. And that's how you learn what works and what doesn't work. That it also shows you how to move things through the system smoothly. And so if you're not able to collect this data, that's going to be a weak spot in your PM career, because your judgment with AI, your ability to have good judgment, or some people call it taste, is far more important now in the era of AI, because all those other things are being automated and you have to really build your judgment as quickly as possible. And it's because you haven't worked through enough requirements and you haven't pushed enough features out into production and seen enough customer reaction to build strong product judgment. The only way to do that is to build a feedback loop. And if you can compress that entire loop from requirement to shipping to learning, you can build your judgment faster than you could have otherwise. And the only way to do that, of course, is to ship, to measure what happened, to compare the result to what you expected, and then to use that learning to make better decisions next time. So This isn't always glamorous either. It's tempting to just move on once this feature ships and then go to the next feature, because that, in some ways, progress is measured in how many features can be shipped, making sure that the roadmap gets fulfilled. Everyone wants this forward momentum. But if you skip the feedback loop, you're not improving your judgment. You're just shipping, and you're not necessarily delivering customer value. And shipping without learning is one of the fastest ways to stay busy without actually getting better. So let's talk about how AI can help you make the feedback loop stronger and faster and more connected to the product in a way that actually makes it perform better. So level 1, your job is to manually review the performance after every feature is being released. So you start with this basic question: did this feature do what we expected it to do? You look at the KPIs or the metrics and how they're connected to the feature. It should be included into the acceptance criteria. It could be at some level. It could also be success metrics that live below the acceptance criteria. So you could have a success metric of a certain conversion from one step to another that would live in success metrics. But it could also be performance things related to an acceptance criteria as well. So you look at things like usage and conversion and retention, engagement, completion rates. It could be revenue. It could be the number of support tickets that have been reduced. It could be just based off of customer feedback. The important thing is to compare what you thought would happen with what actually happened. What did you expect customers to do? What did they actually do? Were your assumptions right? Were your assumptions wrong? This is also where you can do a post-mortem as well, especially if you're early on in your product management career. Ideally, you do this with the entire team. But even if the team doesn't do a formal post-mortem, you can do this yourself. You can look back at the original requirement, the acceptance criteria, the decisions you made, the trade-offs that you accepted, the result that you got. And this is how you build the judgment. This is again, critical in your earlier career. You should always look for ways to improve the feature after it's been released, whether that improvement happens immediately or whether it happens later based off of priority. But the important point here is to capture those improvements and put them into the backlog. So level 2 is essentially AI-assisted analysis into the feedback loop. Instead of only looking at the metrics yourself, give the LLM the original requirement, the jobs to be done context, the acceptance criteria, the post-launch results, customer feedback, and then ask it to help evaluate whether your feature appears to be working. And so you can have this sort of impartial arbiter. You don't want to grade your own homework, and the LLM can actually grade your homework in this respect. AI can help summarize what changed, compare the actual results, identify patterns in customer feedback, and surface possible reasons the feature didn't perform as well as it should have. This is especially useful when you have multiple sources of feedback coming in. You have analytics data, support tickets, sales comments, user interviews, emails, internal team feedback as well. AI can help you synthesize that information into a clearer picture. But your judgment still matters. At level 3, you connect the feedback loop directly into your product systems. AI can pull the original requirement, post-launch results, customer feedback, and so forth. Then it can summarize what happened, identify gaps, and suggest improvements connected back to the original jobs to be done framework. Again, this is why the jobs to be done framework is so important, because it's the basis of how you evaluate things moving forward. It can also help you create backlog items in the right place, in the right context in which you need to execute against them. And this makes the learning loop more traceable. You're not just saying we should improve this. You're saying, here's what we expected. Here's what happened. Here's what we learned. And here's what the improvement is we should consider next. Now the workflow goes from ship, check my dashboard, read feedback, write notes, create follow-ups, to ship, collect these signals automatically, synthesize that learning with the assistance of an LLM, and then create the next actions. And that's a much stronger loop. It's going to help your judgment accelerate much faster. And then finally, just picking up on the startup mode, you want this feedback loop to get even tighter. If the improvements is small and clear and safe, you might decide to use Cloud Code or Codex yourself to make those improvements directly in the product. This means it can mean something as simple as just adjusting copy, but it could also mean fixing a small workflow issue, improving some kind of empty state, updating an event, changing smaller UI behavior. The idea is that the startup mode compresses the loop from learning and improving, so that you actually take what you've learned and you can actually implement it in the product. You release the feature, you measure what happened, understand what needs to change, and when appropriate, you can push that improvement forward yourself. So this isn't about staring at dashboards. It's about building better product judgment faster. AI helps you close the loop between what you thought would happen and what actually happened. Requirements define the original intent. Metrics show whether the feature worked. Feedback explains why customers reacted the way that they did. AI helps synthesize the signals. Integrated systems turn the learning into follow-up action. And startup mode compresses the learning to improvement moves it from learning to improvement into one flow where you can actually ship those improvements. So the old workflow looks like this. You ship, you move on, you maybe check metrics later, and maybe you learn something. The AI-assisted workflow is you ship, you measure immediately and synthesize what those results mean. You learn from that, and then you can actually go ahead and improve it yourself as a product manager. This is where the real leverage comes from. You're not just shipping anymore. You're getting smarter with every feature you ship. And that is one of the biggest differences between an average PM and a high impact PM. The average PM ships features. The high impact product manager builds a feedback loop that improves their judgment, improves the product, and helps the team make better decisions over time. That's how you triple your impact. You're not just moving faster, you're learning faster. And when you learn faster, every decision gets better. So to sum up, there are 3 workflows that we talked about that will triple your impact as a product manager. First, use the jobs to be done framework to give AI the product context it needs to help you create better requirements faster. Second, use AI to make testing faster, more structured, less manual, so you can protect quality without becoming the bottleneck. And third, use AI to build a stronger feedback loop so every feature you ship improves your judgment and makes your next decision better. And this matters because product management, as we said, is now the new bottleneck. Engineering is getting faster, design is getting faster, research is getting faster. But if the product manager workflow does not speed up, the team will slow down at requirements testing and prioritization and decision making. And this is obviously not optimal. If you want to stay relevant, you need to at least double your impact. That's what keeps you in the game. But if you want to stay ahead and you want to become the kind of product manager who earns more responsibility and gets promoted and becomes impossible to ignore, you need to triple your impact. And this doesn't happen because AI magically makes you a better PM. It happens because AI removes the friction from the work that slows PMs down in writing requirements and validating quality and learning from what actually happens after launch. When you connect these 3 workflows, the role changes. You're not just writing tickets. You're not just testing features. You're not just testing dashboards. You're creating a system where product thinking moves faster, quality improves, and your judgment compounds over time. This is how you stop being the bottleneck. That's how you stay relevant. And this is how you get ahead. Well, as an additional note, I'm going to go through each one of these flows in far greater detail and actually show you specifically how to implement. Here we talk more about what you should implement, but we'll be digging in how specifically to do all of these levels in all of these workflows. So please stay tuned for that in the future. Like and subscribe to get alerts on when that comes out, and take care.